You know what time it is, it's time to finalize those chip strategies. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and we have had a huge update with the latest FA Cup fixtures now finished. We've got a good idea of when the double and blank game weeks are going to be, so we're going to be covering that as well as some hidden information that not many people have noticed about double game weeks happening later in the season, and looking at some of those best chip strategies no matter which chips you guys have remaining. So coming up on today's video, we've got an updated fixture calendar showing you where all of the remaining doubles and blanks will be way before the Premier League announcement. We'll look at which teams play against each other in those double game weeks. Some you may not be expecting. We will identify the best chip strategy for you no matter what chips you have remaining. And we'll look at the best weeks to play the assistant manager and triple captain chips if you do still have them. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you guys. This video is organized into chapters, but I do recommend you watch the whole thing to make sure you have all of the information you need before committing to a decision, because it is almost time to commit to those chip strategies. So guys, here is the latest fixture calendar as it looks right now. Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Man City and Nottingham Forest have qualified to the FA Cup semi-finals, and since the FA Cup semi-finals take place at the same time of the weekend of Game Week 34, these four teams and their previously scheduled Game Week 34 opponents will have their Premier League fixtures moved elsewhere, creating some blank game weeks. Now, I think the best way to explain this is by going fixture by fixture, because whilst we do have a clearer picture than ever before, it is not super straightforward. So at one point we hoped that it would be as simple as all of the teams who blank in Game Week 34 would have their fixtures moved straight into Game Week 33, but sadly that is unlikely to be the case. And by the way guys, I don't expect any of these predictions to be confirmed for sure until Thursday or Friday at the earliest. So if you are planning on wildcarding in Game Week 30, you are going to need to use the predictions and make decisions based on predictions and not actual official confirmation. So ideally, you would save your wildcard until Game Week 31, just so you have that extra information, that confirmed information. But I'll let you guys make that judgment call after you've seen the possibilities. Let's start with Arsenal versus Crystal Palace, which will need to be moved due to Crystal Palace playing in the FA Cup semi-final. This fixture is somewhat limited in where it can go since Arsenal are still in the Champions League, and even though you may expect Arsenal to be knocked out of the next round against Real Madrid, the Premier League cannot take that risk and will want to give plenty of notice of the rescheduling to fans. So therefore, we can pretty much write off all Champions League midweek slots for this fixture to move to, and that leaves us with just two options. We have Game Week 33 and Game Week 36. Now, I think it will be moved to Game Week 33 personally, just to leave Game Week 36 open as an emergency double game week, particularly for Crystal Palace, especially if Crystal Palace do end up reaching the FA Cup final. They will have a big fixture congestion at the end of the season, so it might be a good idea to move this fixture as early as possible. So, whilst it's not confirmed yet, I think it's reasonably safe to assume that both Arsenal and Crystal Palace will double in Game Week 33, giving Crystal Palace those back-to-back doubles in 32 and 33. This is also prime time for an assistant manager chip, by the way, as Ollie Glasner at Crystal Palace, he will be facing a lot of teams with table bonus, and Palace stepping in great form too. That brings us to Man City versus Aston Villa. These two teams who are in the FA Cup semi-finals were due to play each other in Game Week 34 in the Premier League anyway, so it's only one fixture that needs to be moved for the two teams. Aston Villa are still in the Champions League, so they are in the same situation as Arsenal, whereby their fixture will probably be proactively moved into Game Week 33. There's also a chance that this fixture moves into Game Week 36, but I think that is incredibly unlikely due to a reason I will explain shortly. Out of all of the fixtures, I think this is the most nailed on to move into Game Week 33, just like we predicted in the last few videos. Nottingham Forest versus Brentford is where things get a little bit tricky. So you may have noticed the pattern of Game Week 34 fixtures being most likely moved to Game Week 33. For Nottingham Forest versus Brentford, this is not the case, and here's why. So this Nottingham Forest fixture calendar between Game Week 33 and 35, as you can see, they played their Game Week 33 fixture on the Monday. Now this creates a really tight gap between that game and the FA Cup semi-final on Saturday or Sunday. A 4-day gap if it is played on the Saturday, and it will be a 5-day gap if it is played on the Sunday between the FA Cup and obviously the Premier League game. So If the TV companies decide they want the FA Cup to play on the Saturday, there's basically no chance that there's going to be space for this Brentford fixture to be rescheduled into Game Week 33. There would be such a short gap between games for Nottingham Forest. It is just too tough. So if it is scheduled for Sunday, then it is possible that the Premier League game is scheduled to the Thursday within Game Week 33. But if it is played on the Saturday, then there's just absolutely no chance here. And the more likely scenario is that the fixture is just moved to the largest gap between fixtures for Forest. And particularly if their FA Cup game is played on the Saturday, the 26th of April, it creates this really nice gap between the FA Cup following the Game Week 35 Premier League fixture on Monday, the 5th of May. So a really nice big gap there between the FA Cup and the Game Week 35 fixture. So right now, it makes the most sense for this Brentford fixture for Forest to remain within Game Week 34, but postpone to the midweek slot of Game Week 34 instead. Particularly as in the UK, at least, this is not a televised game. So TV clashes with the Champions League semi-finals, not so much of a factor because this game is not going to be shown on TV in the UK regardless. So whilst the double Game Week 33 is still possible, and technically Game Week 35 and 36 are technically possible despite being super unlikely, it does seem that the most likely scenario is that the Nottingham Forest versus Brentford game remains within Game Week 34 and moving to the midweek slot rather than where it was previously at the weekend, meaning neither of these teams will double and neither of these teams will blank despite Forest being in the FA Cup semi-final. I know that's very boring, I know that means less doubles and less blanks, but this is sadly the situation we've kind of been left with. This fixture is definitely the most difficult one to predict, and it is the fixture most likely to cause issues for anyone choosing to wildcard in Game Week 30, as I kind of mentioned earlier. It's very unlikely we'll have confirmation on this one before the Game Week 30 deadline, and even if it isn't confirmed by Game Week 31, we will have a much clearer idea on what the Premier League plan to do by that point. So yeah, guys, as always, I wish I could tell you 100% what is going to happen, but sadly, the best I can do here is give you the different possibilities. I would say generally, this fixture, probably 75% sure it remains within Game Week 34, and maybe a 25% chance it goes into Game Week 33. Let's finally move on to Game Week 36 and 37. As we've mentioned in previous chip strategy videos, the two FA Cup finalists and their scheduled Game Week 37 opponents will not be able to play their Premier League fixture at the weekend of Game Week 37. And this is because the FA Cup final takes place during the weekend of Game Week 37. This will mean one of two things. Either the fixture will move to the Game Week 37 midweek slot, changing nothing as far as FPL is concerned, or they will move the fixture into Game Week 36, creating a double game week in Game Week 36 and a blank game week in Game Week 37. Which two teams will make it to the final is pretty difficult to call. The semi-finals are Forest against City and Palace against Villa, and I'm finding it really difficult to call either game with certainty, but one of Nottingham Forest or Man City will have their fixture moved somewhere, and one of Crystal Palace and Aston Villa will have their fixture moved somewhere as well. Whether that remains in 37 or moves to 36 is a different question. Now, we do actually have a hint that the fixtures will be moved from Game Week 37 into 36, creating doubles and blanks for FA Cup finalists and their scheduled Game Week 37 opponents. And this actually came from West Ham's website, and this is in reference to the FA Cup quarter-final games, which just took place this weekend. Should Forest win, which they did, by the way, guys, then triumph again in the FA Cup semi-final. Their final is scheduled for 17th of May, Saturday the 17th of May, at Wembley Stadium. Should they go all the way, West Ham's home game with Forest will be potentially brought forward to the midweek of Tuesday the 13th or Wednesday the 14th of May. So this is suggesting that teams that progress to the FA Cup semi-final, final, and their scheduled 37 opponents will have their fixtures moved back into Game Week 36. Now, it does, of course, say potentially, so it's nothing confirms yet. And, of course, it does only specify the Nottingham Forest versus West Ham fixture, but the fact that this made it onto the website tells us that this is a very real possibility that could happen. I do expect we will see similar announcements for all of the FA Cup semi-finalists and their scheduled Game Week 37 opponents within the next few days, hopefully, which would give us these teams with potential blanks and doubles. Now, given Nottingham Forest and West Ham slightly better odds, just because that's the only fixture that has been name-checked in any official capacity so far. But there is another fixture that has a lot of pressure to actually move into Game Week 36, and that is Aston Villa and Spurs. So Aston Villa are due to face Spurs in Game Week 37. Spurs are still in the Europa League, and the final actually takes place in the midweek slot of Game Week 37. That means if Aston Villa reach the FA Cup final at the weekend of Game Week 37 and Spurs reach the Europa League final in the midweek, there will be no chance for this game to be played within Game Week 37. That means this game will have to be played in Game Week 36, creating a blank and a double for both teams. There is a good chance that the Premier League are proactive about this, preparing for the possible scenario, because since it's so late in the season, it would be a disaster if both teams reached their finals and the fixture had absolutely nowhere to go. The season would be basically over. There'll be no remaining slots to move the fixture. So I can see a little bit of proactivity for this one. Therefore, assuming these teams keep progressing, and perhaps even if they don't, you know, to get ahead of the game a little bit here, there is a really solid chance that Game Week 36 will be a double for Aston Villa and Spurs. And by the way, this is why I think it's super unlikely that Aston Villa versus Man City moves to Game Week 36, because it does block off this slot for the Aston Villa versus Spurs game. So Game Week 37 will have a maximum of 4 blanking teams. Game Week 36 technically could have more than 4 double Game Week teams, but in reality, it's more likely to cap at 4 as a maximum. And like, even despite everything I just said, they could just move the fixture and keep them in 37 for many of these cases, meaning no doubles or blanks during this period at all. Or maybe they just move one fixture. Maybe they just move the Aston Villa versus Spurs one, for example. That's a possibility too. Yeah, as you can probably tell, there is so much uncertainty about these two game weeks. They are a little bit further away, so it is tougher to predict these kind of things. But I know what you guys are thinking. So do we need to prepare and save our chips for 36 and 37? The answer is probably not. Game week 32, 33, and 34 are pretty much clearly defined, pretty clear, really. We know that 2 to 3 teams should double and 2 to 3 teams should blank during this period. That is more than the 0 to 2 doubling and 0 to 2 blanking in 36 and 37. So sure, maybe Game Week 36 could provide an opportunity for a triple captain or assistant manager if you still have them, but without further information, it's kind of difficult to say much more than that. I certainly don't think they're worth ignoring, you know, the game weeks directly in front of us in order to, you know, chase the potential of Game Week 36 and 37. But overall, the FA Cup results have meant that we basically have the smallest possible double 33 and blank 34, with just 2 doubles in 33 and 2 blanks in 34, the most likely outcome. We will also have less pressure on fixtures moving from 37 to 36 as well here, which means we'll probably see smaller amounts of fixtures here as well, if any at all. So it's difficult to say. There's not going to be as much chaos as we perhaps thought previously. So let me show you this to kind of give a good overview here, because this is an ultra simplified version of the calendar with absolutely no nuance, containing what I believe to be the most likely outcome for the upcoming weeks. If you're planning on a wild card right now and need to make a very big assumption on what the rest of the season might look like, and you can't wait until an official fixture announcement, this is the calendar I would be working from. And I think this version of the calendar really demonstrates how uninteresting the rest of the season will be compared to what could have been and what we've seen in previous years as well. Everything has gone wrong for those hoping for some big fixture movements, and this is going to mean chips are, particularly like the bench boost and the free hit, they're a little bit less powerful now than perhaps they previously were going to be. So if you did save your chips, this is probably not the outcome you were hoping for. If you used all of your chips already, you've absolutely gotten away with it this season. Seriously, it is a real shame to those who have, you know, played patiently, really planned ahead of the game. Not going to be rewarded as much this season. And you know, if that sounds like you, then I definitely empathize with that as a certified planner of FPL. But that's just the game, man. You can't predict exactly what the results are going to be. You can predict what the impacts of those results will be, but if everything goes a specific way, then you kind of end up with situations like this. So I do still think we can try and make the best of the hand that's been dealt with some chip strategies. So, yeah, let's cover that. But before we do, a quick note on the Game Week 30 versus Game Week 31 wildcard that we kind of mentioned already. Obviously, we have our predictions on the most likely outcomes, but if you're looking for an unlikely edge, holding off on your wildcard until Game Week 31 or maybe even Game Week 32, and hoping for some of these less likely outcomes to come true, it could give you a big advantage if the unlikely things happen. And that's a very big if. So if Nottingham Forest versus Brentford ends up being a double in 33 or maybe even 36, you never know, then you can take advantage of that because maybe you're a bit more patient. If some of the expected Game Week 33 doubles end up falling into Game Week 36, again, I don't think that's very likely. Again, you will have an advantage if you just hold off one more week to wait for some more verified information. But like I keep saying, it is unlikely that these things will happen. But if they do, there will be big advantages to those who held off on their wild card and waited for that guaranteed information. So just wanted to throw that one out there. Could be a potential edge, but probably not. Anyway, guys, let's talk about strategy. But before we do, I have to say, guys, if you are enjoying this video, finding it useful, make sure you do drop a like. It really does help out the channel so much. We do work very hard on these chip strategy videos to make sure you guys are all in the know ahead of the final run-in, really, of FPL. So do make sure you leave a like, subscribe as well if you're new around here, particularly as we will be doing a Game Week 30 wildcard video that'll be coming out later. So stay tuned for that one, notifications on, and we'll have you covered with that video as well. Just want to jump straight into the strategies at this point, guys. I'm excited. I'm sure you guys can tell. I love the planning stuff. I really do. So this is strategy number 1. You may find this one pretty familiar. So this is going to be the most popular strategy by far. I think it's kind of perfect for those who don't have the assistant manager chip, and this is how it works. So you're going to wildcard in Game Week 30 or Game Week 31, and the benefit of wildcarding in Game Week 31, of course, is that you have more information. A lot of the questions and doubts we raised before, you know, we're going to have a lot of answers, particularly related to Nottingham Forest and Brentford. It is unlikely that we will get any clarity or confirmation until later in the week, so saving your wildcard until Game Week 31 could give you that big advantage. That said, if your team is in a bad state right now, you have injuries, players with poor fixtures, or you are lacking some of those key assets, then a wildcard now in Game Week 30 is totally fine too. Like I say, I will be releasing a Game Week 30 wildcard video, so make sure you have got notifications on for that if you would like to see it. But I thought it was important that we did the context video first before the wildcard video itself, so hopefully that's okay with you guys. But anyway, in this strategy, on your wildcard, you will be looking to bring in as many double Game Week 33 players as possible. You're loading up on Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, and Man City, possibly even a triple up on each of those teams. A Newcastle triple up is also a really good idea ahead of their double in 32. And also, if you are wildcarding in Game Week 30, it might be a good idea to include some Nottingham Forest cover just in case they do end up doubling in 33 or, you know, maybe even 36. So it might be a good idea just to get a couple of those players in there, you know, just in case, you know. But anyway, if you do still have your triple captain chip, this is the moment you would play it in Game Week 32, probably on Alexander-Arnold for his double against Man United and Crystal Palace, but this is optional. If you don't have triple captain, no problem at all. Make sure your bench is strong too, as you will be next looking to bench boost in Game Week 33. People might say it is not important to bench boost here because it's not such a big double anymore, but it's still likely to be the week in which your bench looks the strongest between now and the end of the season. So it does make a lot of sense if you are bench boosting, even if you don't have double game week players, even if it's a few single game week players there. This is probably the point in which your bench looks the strongest. We're looking at players like Newcastle players with a strong single game week, for example, that you would ordinarily want to play. So yeah, I think that's totally fine too. The dream of bench boosting, really, with 15 double game week players is a thing of the past, I think. But you can still get a few points here. Then we get to game week 34, where we expect Arsenal, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, and Man City to blank. You will be loaded up on these teams from your wild card and your bench boost. So now is the time to free hit them out and create a great free hit team for game week 34, targeting all of the best game week 34 fixtures. By this point, hopefully, we should have more clarification on the game week 36 and 37 situation, but because you wildcarded in FA Cup semi-finalist players into your team, that means that some of your players will go on to be finalists as well. So you will have a few guaranteed game week 36 doublers if fixtures are moved that way. So don't overcommit if you don't have any spare transfers at this kind of point. You know, we're going to have to take 36 and 37 as they come a little bit, but overall this period of fixtures we can't plan too much for, so it's good to keep an open mind. So this strategy I think is one of the safest out there. It covers you with your doubles and your blanks very effectively, and it plays the bench boost at an optimal moment. It also has room for a triple captain if you still have it, maybe even some options on triple captain. Could be game week 32, could be game week 36 as well maybe. So yeah, it's a really nice strategy. I think it's going to be very popular among the top managers for good reason. It's just smart, it's sensible, it's a pathway that doesn't really have too much potential to go wrong. The biggest disadvantage is that it doesn't really make room for the assistant manager chip. Don't worry, I do have two assistant manager chip strategies for those of you who still have the old AM chip, but this is not one of them. So obviously, if you don't have your free hit chip, this strategy is not going to work for you. That is a disadvantage. And a final disadvantage is that I guess it's pretty boring. That's kind of the biggest criticism I can think of it. Most people on this strategic pathway will have near identical squads, which is going to mean it's going to make it very difficult to gain ground on any of the FPL managers who are kind of following this same pathway as you, if that makes sense. So you're really going to be counting on a lot of people doing different strategies or not having strategies at all, or maybe not being super engaged. And that's really the way you would gain rank in this strategy at the highest level. You know, if you've got a really high rank right now, it's probably more of a strategy that solidifies your rank rather than pushes you forward too much. So I do want to put that one out there. But yeah, let's move on to the next strategy because we have got some more interesting ones, I think. So this is strategy 2. It's a variation of the previous strategy, but sort of reverses your wildcard squad and your free hit squad. With this strategy, I do think information is power. So whilst you could try to wildcard in game week 30, I do highly recommend waiting until 31 for this one. If you can't wait till 31, I would have a look at some of the other strategies. The reason the information is key to this strategy is because you will be wildcarding in players who don't double. So if some players end up doubling outside of game week 33, you're probably not going to have them in your squad. So let's go through this. Wildcard in game week 30 or 31, preferably 31. Include Crystal Palace, Newcastle players as a first priority, and mostly ignore Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Man City players from your wildcard draft. Bench boost in game week 32. Again, it's not a crazy strong bench boost, but it isn't really that much weaker than a game week 33 bench boost now. And this is going to allow you to free hit in game week 33, maximizing your double game week players for this one specific and individual week. Load up on Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Man City players in that free hit team. You're going to have Crystal Palace players already, but again, put them in your free hit team as well. Maybe even swap your Crystal Palace players for players you might prefer for the double. After that, you can play game week 36 and 37 as they come, depending on what ends up happening. You could get lucky, have some of your players doubling in 36, but who knows this far in advance. Now, the advantage of this strategy is that you can basically have any players you want in your wildcard team. As long as you don't have too many players from Arsenal, Villa, Palace, and City, or at least you're willing to sell them ahead of game week 34, then you can go pretty crazy. You can load up on Liverpool, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Forest, Fulham, Wolves, any teams with strong players, strong fixtures. You can have them as part of your permanent squad, and it takes the pressure away from having to solely focus your wildcard team on those double game week 33 players. It gives you more options, really, which could be nice, particularly for Nottingham Forest. The disadvantages are that there's no real clear week to use your assistant manager or triple captain, other than maybe, the mysterious and elusive game week 36 potential double. So yeah, if you do have an assistant manager and triple captain, probably wouldn't go for this strategy, to be honest. Crystal Palace are probably the biggest annoyance in this strategy too, as you likely are going to want to own them in between 30 and 32. Then you're also going to free hit them in 33 anyway. So it's weird. You don't want these players for Gameweek 34 either. So it means you are locked out of some of the Arsenal and Man City players you may want outside of Gameweek 33, where you're going to be free hitting them in. So, if you've got your all of these Crystal Palace players, you can't also have all of these Arsenal and Man City players. You can't have them all well, you can have them for the free hit in 33, but you are going to be locked out of some of these players that you perhaps do want in the short term, if that makes sense, because you don't want to have these players in the blank because you're not free hitting in the blank. So maybe you want a Raya, maybe you want a Saka, maybe you want Haaland for your general team. Just not going to be possible because you need to minimize the players who you have in your squad, in your wildcard team, that blank in Gameweek 34. To be fair, that could end up being an advantage, though, if you want the likes of the expensive Haalands and Saka for Gameweek 33 only, but you feel that they will damage the balance of your squad if you were to own them in the long term. And actually, you may get away with this one. So it's a bit of a different strategy, which might give you a bit of an edge, but it's always risky going against the crowd. So this is strategy 3. This is going to be this strategy if you already used your free hit, most likely in Game Week 29, I imagine. Congratulations, free hitters in Game Week 29, by the way. It seems like you guys did pretty well in the end. And this strategy, it works really well if your squad is already loaded up on Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Man City players, as you will be already prepared for the upcoming doubles. If you have your assistant manager, this could fit into this strategy quite well. It is optional, but it does fit. So here's how it works. If you do have your assistant manager, you have two choices. You either play it between Game Week 30 and 32 with a bench boost in 33. But by the way, guys, this reduces your need to bring in Crystal Palace and Newcastle players too, because one of those slots will be covered by your assistant manager. And also you could delay the assistant manager into Game Week 31, and that would allow you to take advantage of the double, but it does leave your bench boost a little bit homeless. So you kind of have to play your bench boost sub-optimally on a game week later whenever your bench looks strong. So if you don't have your assistant manager chip, that's fine too. Ignore everything I just said. Generally, between now and Game Week 32, you're going to want to focus on bringing in more Crystal Palace and Newcastle players. Then, as we head into Game Week 33, you will top up on your Arsenal, Aston Villa, Man City players to create a nice bench boost. The bench boost in this strategy is probably weaker than in the other strategies, just because the other guys will maybe have wildcarded into a bench boost, and this is not what's happening here. But anyway, Game Week 34, that is when you're going to play your wildcard into the final part of the season. Remove those players who blank in Game Week 34 and set your team up for a strong end to the season. A later wildcard could also be advantageous, as you will have a much clearer idea of where the fixtures will be rescheduled to. And, it leaves you with a bit of flexibility, really, if we do see anything happen in Game Week 36 and Game Week 37. So, could be nice. You never know. The biggest advantage to this strategy is it does give you a viable plan, even if you used your free hit. And as we mentioned, maybe give you a bit of flexibility as you're not locked into anything, like those who are wildcarding now. They will be locked into a strategy and a pathway. You guys have a bit more flexibility. A late wildcard may also give you a strong end to the season, particularly if Game Week 36 and 37 fixtures are moved around. The biggest disadvantage for this strategy is it kind of relies on you already being super prepared for the upcoming fixtures. If you've been following, the chip strategy guides on this channel this season, you've been following this pathway already, and hopefully you're already pretty prepared for what's coming up. But if not, you could struggle to get lots of double game week players for Game Week 33 using free transfers alone, especially when compared to the other strategies who will be absolutely loaded up thanks to their wildcards. That said, if you have used your free hit already, your options are limited, and a strategy similar to this is pretty much your only option, to be honest. I guess you could wildcard earlier, but it means that you would have to sacrifice either Game Week 33 or 34, which puts you back in the same problem. At least with a later wildcard, you can focus on having a really strong end to the season, which the other strategies might not be as well optimized for. Oh, we've got more strategies, guys. This is number 4. So if you are one of those chip hoarders who have your wild card still, you got your free hit, you got your assistant manager, you got all of these chips in your back pocket, this could be the one for you. But be warned, this chip strategy neglects the bench boost and triple captain. Now, if you've passed all of the previous double game weeks and decided not to take advantage of them, you know, sadly, some of your chips are going to go homeless, a bit like me when people stop watching my FPL videos at some point. But let's go through it. So, commit now to an early wildcard in Game Week 30. Like I mentioned, I'll be sharing a wildcard draft in the next video, so stay tuned for that. But this wildcard will be loaded with Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Man City players. Next, activate your assistant manager chip. I think on Glasner, personally, which might mean that you need to save one of your 3 Crystal Palace slots for your manager when you're building your wild card, by the way, guys. Your assistant manager will be active between Game Week 31 and 33, taking advantage of 2 double game weeks and multiple table bonus games. If you do choose Glasner, could be huge points. Free hit in Game Week 34, just like in the first strategy, to remove those blanking players and replace them with players who actually do play. And your team should be reasonably well set up for the remaining weeks too. This strategy shares a lot of the advantages of strategy 1, with the additional advantage that it maximizes your potential points from the assistant manager chip. The disadvantages are also the same, but with like this, you know, with all these chips, there's kind of really no natural place to play a bench boost. I think it's worth making the sacrifice, though. The bench boost has become weaker after the FA Cup results, and we know how strong the assistant manager can be. It's a kind of a case of priorities, and I think this way I would kind of prefer to prioritize the assistant manager. So if you do also have your bench boost as well, I guess kind of use it whenever your bench looks really strong between Game Week 35 and 38. Some people will say play it in 36, but honestly, even if we do get multiple doubles in Game Week 36, you're unlikely to be super optimized for that anyway. So yeah, it may just be for you, Game Week 36 ends up being the best bench boost week, but it might not be. So it's probably best to just kind of keep an open mind, accept that the assistant manager is the priority, and the bench boost will provide a small points boost later in the season at some unspecified point. So this is the final of the major chip strategies that I want to talk about today, and this is one for those of you who are feeling a little bit more patient, in hopes that Game Week 36 may provide something interesting, and I guess it might. So this strategy could work for you if you actually, you know, you have your team already looking pretty good for Game Week 32 and 33. You already have players from Crystal Palace, Newcastle, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Man City, and you still have your free hit and wildcard chip. This assistant manager, it could be played in 30 or 31 if you're willing to play your bench boost randomly later in the season. But if you don't have your assistant manager, it doesn't really make a difference to this strategy. For this one, use transfers to continue to add Crystal Palace and Newcastle players ahead of Game Week 32, and Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Man City players ahead of Game Week 33. In Game Week 33, hopefully you've got enough going for you for a little bench boost, straight into a wildcard get a Game Week 34 to prepare for the end of the season. This wildcard team is going to contain players knocked out of the FA Cup, so you can minimize your blank Game Week players for Game Week 34, but also for Game Week 37. And in Game Week 36, you play your free hit, assuming there are some doubles there, and if there are some doubles there, you can get yourself a really strong team for Game Week 36 and destroy everyone else, pretty much. It's a big if, though, but, you know, it could happen. The advantages of this strategy, it's you know, it ends the season super strong, really strong, kind of regardless of whether you have doubles and blanks at the end of the season, but mostly if they do. But if they do, really strong end to the season. The disadvantages are fairly numerous, so it does mean neglecting the doubles in 32 and 33. Sure, you can still pick up some players, some points here, but you're not going to be super well prepared compared to those wild carding in 30 and 31, and also the people who just free hitted in 29 as well. These guys are going to have a bit of a head start on you. Now, that may end up not being a problem as long as there are some doubles in 36, but if there isn't, you've made a short-term sacrifice for practically no long-term gain. So this strategy is super risky, and honestly, not really one I'm considering myself, but I did want to include it for some variety, and of course for those crazy people out there who just really want to try something different. This at least provides that. So here are some other strategies. If you have no wildcard, use strategy 1 or 2, depending on which one you are better set up for, using transfers to set up your team rather than the wildcards. Use transfers basically as a replacement for a wildcard, I suppose. If you have no free hit or wildcard, it's not really much to strategize. I guess just use your remaining chips on double game weeks. If you have all of your chips remaining, and you're just going to have to prioritize some chips over others and play some of them in suboptimal weeks. We are running out of double game weeks. Lots of game weeks have passed by that maybe many people ignored, and the consequence of that, of hoarding the chips, is that there are fewer and fewer opportunities going forward, particularly as the very inconvenient assistant manager chip does take up 3 game weeks where you can't use any other chips during that time. So to be honest, I'm sure there will be people out there, even in Game Week 38, telling me, oh, Dan, I still have all of my chips remaining. What is the best strategy for me? And I know that's an extreme example, but there is no strategy for those people if you save all your chips to too late in the season. And because of the limited number of game weeks, you probably can't have a strategy in mind for every one of the individual chips that you do have left, just for some of them. So the rest kind of will have to go wherever, and you probably need to kind of pray for a double in 36, which is still possible. But anyway, in terms of prioritizing which chips to strategize and which chips, maybe it would be an afterthought, I would definitely say that the wildcard, the free hit, and the assistant manager are your priority chips. Get them in place, get them in the best positions first. And then after that, the bench boost is probably the next most important one. And finally, triple captain. Make sure the ones first on that list are well placed, and then, the other ones can maybe go in suboptimal places. So you may have noticed that we didn't speak much about the triple captain today, and there is a very good reason for that. So assuming you have a few other chips remaining to use, the best weeks to triple captain have been and gone. And as it's kind of the weakest chip, you basically need to first prioritize the positionings of all of your other chips. And once you have done that, you can look at which game weeks are remaining left over to use your triple captain. So for example, if you know you're going to wildcard in Game Week 30, assistant manager in 31, 3 hit in 34, and bench boost in 36, you then know that you have a choice to triple captain between Game Week 35, 37, or 38. Those will be your only options remaining after that. So here are a list of the best remaining weeks to triple captain. If any of these game weeks are occupied by other chips, then that's not going to be possible. But Game Week 33 is the best. Game Week 32 is the second best. Then Game Week 36. Then Game Week 34, Haaland versus Spurs. Game Week 30, Salah versus Spurs. Game Week 30 is Haaland versus Leicester. For Game Week 31, 35, 37, and 38, there isn't really a clear triple captain option there. None of Salah, Haaland, or even Palmer have good fixtures there. Saka plays Southampton away in Game Week 38, but that's basically it. So basically, if you still do have your triple captain chip, assuming you want to use your other chips on the remaining doubles and blanks, you are seriously limited to your options. So whilst we have the best and worst weeks to use them, more than likely those best weeks are not going to be options for you if you want to play your other chips there. So guys, that is where we are at right now. As always, I'll do my best to keep you guys updated as things become more clear over time. I think we will get a lot of official confirmation and announcements before the end of the week, which will be really useful. But in the meantime, the predictions will have to do. Let me know your thoughts on the blank and double game weeks. Are you a bit disappointed by them? Let me know which of the chip strategies you're thinking about going for, which are your favorites, which ones you don't like so much. If you've got any other chip strategies that we didn't speak about today, I would love to hear them. And of course, guys, if there was anything confusing in this video and you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. If I've made any mistakes in this video, do let me know as well, of course. I'm usually really good with replying to the comments on YouTube, so please do feel free to leave one down below. But that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, drop a like before you go. It really does help out the channel, and do subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. And I will see you later, mates, for that wildcard video for Game Week 30. Bye-bye.